Hi, I'm Emily from Threaded Journey. Let's create something you'll love.
I wanted to show you the pattern first because it does put together just a smidge differently. Page 1 is here, then you have 2, the pocket, 4, 5, 6. And then when you cut it out, it's just one piece that's going to be on the fold, and then it has a pocket. You need 1.5 yards of fabric. This makes up adorable in linen. I did one for my daughter. She looks so cute in it. I am going to make one for sewing. So mine's just going to be made out of cotton, so you can make it out of any woven, but it isn't lined. So that's why the linen is nice, because it's the same on both sides. You are also going to need a 24-inch square piece of fabric for making your own bias tape. This would be so cute as gifts. You could do so many different fabrics. You could do it for a baker, a gardener. It is limitless with the cute fabrics that are out. I'm just going to show you real fast. I did this little corner. I did the 1/2-inch press line first, then made kind of like a triangle. I used my pinking shears to cut off the little tip, and then when I fold it down, I just make that nice little corner there without the bulk. I stitched down my hem there, pressed it. I had a center line ironed in my apron piece and a center line ironed here, so that makes it super easy to line up with my pin and get it centered. So now it's decision time. Do I want one big pocket? Do I want 2? Do I want 3? Now, here's the key. I don't want to go all the way around. I want to make sure that I don't sew this top line. So I'm just going to put some little clips. When I have to stop as I'm sewing or something, I always try to put some little reminder, 2 clips in a row, something like that. A weird clip that's not like the others, just to kind of remind me, hey, don't do that. All right, I'm going to go stitch this up, and I'll be right back. I will show you how I stitched it. I went all the way around the edge first, then I turned and did just a little bit right here, and then came back and restitched right along that same line that I had already done on the other piece, so that on the front you can't tell. I did another line, not that it would matter at all. Whatever you're going to use it for, do your pockets. All right, this little simple apron pattern is going to teach you how to do French seams, which is awesome. So we are going to take the furthest strap over here and pull it to this is the neck, so the opposite shoulder here. We are going to stitch this wrong sides together, okay? So I'm just going to clip it here. And I'm going to take the other one, and I'm going to do the exact same thing over here. I'm going to go to my machine, and I have made my seam. And of course it looks weird because it's sticking out on the right side of the fabric, which is what it's supposed to do. I went ahead and just serged mine. Just take your pinking shears maybe and go across there. It's going to be encased. It doesn't matter if you don't really do anything, but that just kind of make sure it doesn't ravel if you do one of those things. Now, I am going to now fold, and my now right sides are together, and I'm going to stitch along right here. But make sure you're stitching outside of your seam allowance. You don't want to stitch on top of it, because if you stitch on top of that old seam allowance, when you fold it, it will show. I've pressed it, and I have pressed it to the back strap So my seam allowance is all on one side here, and then I'm just gonna top stitch it down, trying to get as close to that edge as possible. You're a new sewer, stitch it with this side up so you can make sure that you do that and it's all included. All right, my seams are finished. Looks fairly straight. We're going to need a 24-inch square piece of fabric to make your bias tape. I created a French method bias tape, which means that I have just folded it in half, okay? Mine was 2 inches, so now I have a 1-inch piece of bias tape, and I just kind of made a nice little roll so it wasn't scattered everywhere. Now to get started on my project, I have cut a straight line, then I ironed a triangle here, and then just pressed it. That way, when I come around and meet it, I can slide it right up under here, the other edge right up under here, and it will create a nice edge that isn't as bulky and won't unravel or anything like that. And it's much easier than the directions that she has. I'm starting with one of the back pieces. That way, where my seam is won't show as much. All right, I'm clipping down just a few. I'm not clipping all the way around. But I do want to make sure that where I made that nice little fold right here is up. So that's the direction that I'm going. So I just kind of got it started here with my clips, and I'm going to take it to my machine. When you are starting to sew, make sure you don't start at the edge, because you're going to need to be able to get up under this little flap and stitch that down together. So start several inches in. I wasn't going to clip the whole thing. There's no need to. I just have my roll of tape on the floor, and it's just kind of coming up here between my legs. And I'm just matching it up as I go. I do want to make sure that any little fraying edges are pushed to the side and don't get going onto my fabric. The whole reason you create bias tape, instead of just cutting your fabric straight, folding it, whatever, is because cutting it on the bias allows it to stretch just a little bit, and that will allow it to go around the curves. So I'm just kind of stretching it just a little bit, similar to like putting in a neckband or something like that, just a little bit, so that I'm following the curve of my main fabric. All right, my tails are at the meeting point. So my first one is just right there at the edge of my other one. And there's my little tuck. So I want to make sure that I cut this so that it has plenty of room to tuck, but before I meet my stitches right here, okay? I just cut it off diagonal, placed it right up under there. Then I'm gonna fold this over and meet my stitches. Pressed my seams, and now I need to make this just a 1/4 inch seam allowance by cutting it. It's measured where my 1/4 inch would be. I'm just gonna kind of clip here, and then I can cut. I'm just gonna go along here and cut. All right, I've gone to the ironing board, and what I have done is I have pressed out my binding so that it's away from my main apron fabric. I have pressed my seam allowance up as well, so those two are now touching. What I'm going to do for understitching is I am going to stitch that seam allowance to this binding. I'm not including the main fabric, okay? Just those. I'm going to do it barely away from my main seam, and that's just going to secure that seam allowance and just make a nice finish.
Make sure you do not cross your original seam line. So if your original seam line got a little wonky, just follow along with the wonky. Don't try to straighten it out now.
Okay, I've pressed my binding to the back so that none of it shows on the front. On my curves, the fabric that I used, even cut on the bias, didn't stretch a whole lot. That's okay. I'm just gonna make kind of like a little tuck here and a little tuck here, and that'll make it smooth out and round. Now I'm just going to top stitch it down. I'm just going to show you the top stitching now that it's done. You can see, and behind it is the binding, so none of the binding shows on the top, and it's just nicely top stitched down.
It's done. Look how cute this is. The binding is, the French binding is all on the inside. Super cute. Look how cute the pinafore style is. Adorable.
Like and subscribe so you don't miss the next sew along.